In a land of myth and a time of magic, the destiny of a great kingdom rests on the shoulders of a young boy. His name, Merlin.
Hello, nomads, hello, strangers, and hello, party people. Probably screwed that up. My name is V, and did you guys miss this show? Because I know I did. And today we are talking about episode 10, which is the moment of truth from season 1 of Merlin. Now, to be perfectly honest, this episode kind of had me scratching my head a lot of the things that are normally good, but I found just incredibly stupid. I mean, it had good intentions, but there were moments I was just like, are you for real? Are you honestly for real with this? Are you eating my wiener? But enough of that. Let us dive into the whole episode as a genuine consensus about what's going on, shall we? So the episode begins in, as far as we know, an unknown village being terrorized by a group of bandits led by a man named Kanan. Now, to me, Kanan is very special because it's part of a new trilogy series I'm starting up called The Kanan Chronicles, but that's another story for another time. So Kanan is just rolling in with these band of, I guess, roving countrymen or whatever. I don't know how to really describe his people because they have no character. And he's just trying to rob the entire village of its crops, its food, and anything else that they would have for nourishment. And while they're doing this, we see a familiar face in the crowd as the camera just keeps swinging by as they're looking for someone to tell them about where all their materials are. And we end up seeing that the familiar face is Merlin's mother. I forgot her name, so excuse me for my poor memory. Anyway, as soon as they locate the person they were looking for to talk to, a farmer by the name of Matthew, they decide to give them a deadline of 1 week to deliver what they want for all of their crop needs and everything else. Otherwise, they will either destroy the entire village or, I don't know, I think they'll just make their lives miserable. And I just found out from rewatching certain parts of the episode that Merlin's mother is named Hunith. Hunith. Anyway, though, after the bandit attack, we have to cut towards Camelot, because what is going on with the series protagonist? Well, for some odd reason, he is going off on a water run and just happens to run into his mom as she just walks through the gate. What a coincidence. And then, after trying to find out about the black eye on her, I think it's on her right eye, because the camera's facing her and it's panning it this way, sort of thing, so it'd be her right eye. And then we go to the opening sequence, once again, which is probably one of the most awesome opening sequences ever. But then after that, we have to jump towards Hunith going in front of an audience with the king, organized by Arthur, to talk about at least protection for the village. And that goes as well as you'd expect from Uther's character. You see, Uther has pointed out that he's allowing all the barbarianistic things to happen because it's not within his reach, because he just reached a truce agreement with a king by the name of, I believe, Edric. I can't really pronounce the name that well, so I apologize for if I made any oopsie daisies. But they're just like, well, I wish I could help you, but your village of Eldor is not in my jurisdiction. I would love to help you, but that jurisdiction thing, though, I mean, it would make me a sympathetic character and make people love me after episodes of hating my guts, but it's without my jurisdiction, so my hands are tied. And yet, surprisingly, for the first time in I don't know how many episodes, Arthur and Morgana stand up together, but just like, well, we could just spare a few men and at least bring protection to these people. But then Uther's like, Nah, they don't need our help. They are not in our jurisdiction. Now, if you excuse me, I have some babies to eat and some people to make cry. So, following that notion, we then have a small little segment going on of Merlin preparing to leave Camelot to take care of his mom, and for all intents and purposes, use his magic to erase Kanan and his group. That would have been a good, quick end of the episode, right? Well, here's what the showrunners decided to do. When Merlin's just getting all the equipment that he'll need to just head out, just going to visit Gwen to get a simple sword, here's the first step into why I kind of had a whole head-tilting, head-scratching moment with how silly and ridiculous the whole notion of certain things were. Gwen and Morgana, saying that they want to help out Merlin, decide to head out with him with enough armor and a few more weapons to go out and help him save his village. And yet, from already 10 episodes into a 13-episode season, we all know that Merlin can do this by himself. Literally, he could just go out into the woods, track down all of Kanan and his men, get rid of all of them in a single swoop, and be done with it. So this hindrance thing is just kind of mind-boggling, kind of like, I know you want to nerf Merlin for a majority of the episode to keep the mystery of the magic, but come on, guys. There's a time and a place to nerf someone, and there's also a moment to just have Merlin on his own solo episode to just showcase how strong that he's become in the first season alone. Like, don't we at least deserve that? I'm not complaining out of me not liking the episode. I'm complaining because that was an opportunity wasted so early on to see how far he's grown in such a detailed pace. Because who knows what we could have gotten as a narrative instead of what we ended up having. But I digress. We then move on to Merlin having at least one scene with Gaius, where Gaius is acting like the typical dad. Do you have enough of this? Do you have enough of that? Do you need another blanket? And then as soon as he just talks about all that, he ends up giving him a giant old hug. A hug full of love. Because you cannot beat a hug full of love, people. So, following that, you just see a small little segment of them leaving Camelot by horse, and then them camping out a couple of miles away from Camelot in the forest, where Merlin and his mom have a small discussion about why Gwen and Morgana are coming. To be honest, I have no idea why they actually chose to until later on. So I was just like, well, maybe one of them's trying to hop on the Merlin train. I mean, anything's possible. But no, they're just there because of events that happened previously in the series. Merlin helping out Gwen multiple times, and then Gwen helping Morgana send Mordred to the Druids. So, yeah, all that stuff. And then the mom is just concerned that they'll eventually find out his secret, but he points out something that I actually laughed at. That no one ever finds out that Merlin has all these magical abilities, when 10 episodes in, there are numerous people that by now would have at least suspected that he's a sorcerer of some kind from all the events that happen, and he just happens to be there or just acts like he has no idea what's going on. It's amazing how lucky Merlin is as a character. It really is. So after we have that small little discussion between mother and son, we then have a small magical scene where Merlin practices magic on a small bit of firewood, where he makes the ember into a small little fire dragon. Not that spectacular, but something very subtle into showing the small growth that Merlin has gone from episode 1 to 10, where these 9 episodes, where the episodes in between kind of show how far that he's grown from this guy that has no idea what his magic is and his mom is scared, to where he is currently. But then we have to move on from that scene to, of course, Arthur showing up out of nowhere to help Merlin because. So they then ride into Eldor, But just in time too, because Kanan and his people are there to hilariously attack everybody in order to get what they pretty much demanded a week ago. I think it's a week ago. They have no idea how to establish time, so I'm just assuming it's a week later. But as soon as they're trying to tear shit up and be thugs, here comes Arthur throwing a sword in, ready to fight people, kick some ass. And even Merlin just jumps into the whole thing, just like, I want to help too. Come over here. Then just starts attacking people all out of nowhere. So it's a giant spree. Sorry, I'm sharpening this. So we then have a good choreographed fight scene, and even showing a scene of Merlin turning a sword into a fucking hot stick. You know those things that blacksmiths use to temper the metal? Yeah, that's basically what we ended up having for that scene. Merlin using that to then just stab the fool. Where we then run into another actor I enjoy to death, of Joe Dempsey. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Dempsie, aka Chris Miles from Skins UK. So watching this, I was kind of coming up with my own fan theory of after Chris's death in Series 2, he time travels to become a village person within Merlin after an adventure happens in Doctor Who. I mean, it's a fan theory of mine that I kind of like. I mean, I make a lot of fan theories of skin characters and other mediums. That's just me, I guess. I don't know. So after that well choreographed fight scene, we have Kanan doing the whole "I'll be back" thing that happens out of nowhere. Damn, this blade is very, very rusty. Oh, not that rusty. Anywho, when that happens, we then have Merlin interacting with Joe DePessa's character of Will. Still not used to saying the other character's name, Will, because they used to be village friends. I'm going to put this away so I don't scare anybody into thinking I'm going to hurt myself. I'm a trained professional, guys, don't worry. So, they just try to catch up a little bit through some humorous banter between old friends, because apparently they're childhood friends. And then Arthur is trying to gather the people together to try and fight back against Kanan when he returns. Will does not like this, and points out the obvious that Arthur's coming in blindly trying to make village people that are farmers into soldiers, and he'll get them killed. Will be right a lot of times in this episode, so prepare to have a shot every time I say Will was right. So anyway, though, Arthur decides to get every single motion together to train everyone in the art of swordplay, and automatically Will is right. Trying to train farmers to become fighters is the hardest thing to do. Just like training children to handle various weapons by the time that they reach adulthood, where it's almost blindfolding yourself to learning how to do weapons training, is kind of ridiculous, right? Still though, we also have some small little moments of just Morgana and Gwen trying to see if they can train the women to fight, but then we have the dated reference of sexism in the Middle Ages, where women can't fight at all, it's too dangerous. Tell that to Joan of Arc in France, and tell me that you'd actually allow her to handle that. Or better yet, tell the Amazons during the Greek era of impossible feats that they can't do that. Or better yet, tell Atalanta, one of the original Wild Children, that. Because that sexism bullshit just kind of makes me disgusted. Still though, what happens in between all those segments? Well, we have the hilarious thing of Arthur refusing to eat peasant food. And just making it seem like even though it's scarce, it's beneath his elegant touch of his tongue. Oh! Yeah, all of that witty banter stuff with himself. Along with those lines, we then have some scenes between Merlin and Will that just showcases how much they missed each other as characters, even though we knew nothing about Will before any of this happened. We knew that Merlin had a life before Camelot, but this is the first time that we actually hear things about Merlin's life before becoming Arthur's servant. But we all know as Arthur's bodyguard, because he gets into too much shit to be called a servant. So we kind of learn a little bit more about his character, that it's kind of boring in the village without Merlin because he was Will's best friend. They did a lot of things together. There was an incident with a tree that fell on a man that really didn't like Merlin, but he didn't like him even more when the tree fell by accident. And even about him talking about Will losing his dad in the service of the current king of the region and having a grudge against all nobles. It all goes to show that Merlin has a giant backstory to his life that not a lot of people get to hear about until these kind of episodes come around, where we get to see his childhood and even some history that he himself doesn't know. And I cherish episodes like this. Still though, we then have to get back to the plot. So how do we instrument all this to come back into the story? Well, during all these moments, Arthur is having Matthew the farmer, that we were first introduced in the beginning of the episode, be a sentry to the entire area. The next day or so, we then have Matthew coming back, sure, but he's dead. And Will was right. Why do I say Will is right? Well, Will was saying that Arthur's gonna get everyone killed by being his usual reckless self of not thinking all the elements through. And Will was right, because Matthew ended up dead because he has no idea how to do sentry/scout work about incoming enemies. And that shook up his morale and resolve. So, to contest this, Merlin decides to at least convince Will to give Arthur a chance, but during the conversation, in a way that I cannot really divulge just yet because we're not at that particular season yet, I'm just going to say that Will is right about Merlin not doing anything with his magic despite the consequences when it comes to saving people that he can. Because of certain elements that I can't go into right now, I'm just trying to point that out because Merlin has the power to save the entire village without Arthur having to find out what happened. He can make up his own story, his own lie, with Will as his own alibi for the entire fiasco. That is no issue. The issue is that Merlin continues to hesitate over doing actions like this because he doesn't understand how to do things in secret on a professional level. Over future seasons, he'll learn how to do it better, but in the first season, this is kind of one of those one little notes that kind of shows that one outside character can point out too many things that are wrong with the plot itself that are later remedied through later actions. Almost in a subtle manner that not even the viewers or other reviewers would find out. So following this notion though, Merlin decides to at least give Arthur some hope of a victory without telling him what the victory is going to entail. So Arthur gets all the villagers together, and even after Gwen and Morgana convince him to have the women fight together, the plan is set. But the plan is one of the other head-scratching, head-tilting, what-the-fuck moments ever. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and talk about the attack itself that happens between Canaan's men and the village of Eldor. So Arthur's brilliant idea is to first close up the gates to just seal the enemy inside. That's a good start, but here's where it gets sort of stupid from my own strategist mind. Now, instead of setting traps ahead of time to weed out the enemy so that you'd have an even amount of numbers for inexperienced fighters, because that's what a strategist is supposed to do, weed down the stronger foes to at least a small handful for inexperienced fighters to weed out and defeat. Arthur doesn't do that. For someone that likes to praise himself of being one of the greatest fighters in all of Camelot, this is just something that he found very stupid. He traps the enemy first all together and decides to trap them even more in a ring of fire. Here's where the backdraw of this would be if it wasn't in the show of Merlin. In a real life fight like this, that trap would backfire for the people doing the actual actions because of what Kanan's character is. He's a guy that likes to go in and kill. In real life scenarios, and I'm saying this from my own real life experience, people that go in to kill will recover easily from being in a fire ring. After just a few small minutes, I'm not even saying minutes, 0.7 seconds at best. If you put them in a ring of fire after trapping them, they will immediately recover and immediately try to kill you. No questions asked, they'll have their entire forces rallied to annihilate everybody, taking apart the entire village or even the entire city. Like, not even just one part of the city, several billion blocks of people dead. For people that have a kill or be killed mentality, if you trap them long enough. 0.5 to 0.7 seconds is all that they would need to recover and then end up killing everyone that do not know how to fight off a kill or be killed enemy. But anyway, that's just me on a personal level finding that irritating because of how stupid and how lowbrow that whole thing was. But we had to add tension during that same fight thing because big shock, Morgana can't get the flint rocks ready for Arthur's big plan. So Merlin runs over to use his magic to make the entire firing happen. Seriously, the dumbest thing to do for someone with a kill or be killed mentality. And then they start bum rushing the people, taking them by surprise. And I've counted by the seconds. 1.2 seconds into the fight against people that would have recovered 0.5 to 0.7 seconds ago to kill them on the spot. Just saying. Anywho, they start trying to get all the advantages together to take out all the enemies, and even Will, after first running out on the whole scenario, returns again just in time to save Merlin. And as soon as all the tides are starting to come together, they start seeing that they can't win because there are too many people. Gee, I wonder why there are too many people. Maybe you should have set some damn traps, Arthur. Merlin decides to finally follow suit on Will's advice, proving that, once again, Will was right about Merlin being able to take care of the entire thing by himself. Hell, the entire audience knew that he could do this. So Merlin decides to create an entire small little tornado to just throw around the entire enemy. Although I will note that for certain elements that you can notice in the show, there was a lot of ragdoll physics for the real life actors, and so many people were just staring at the camera, just like, and then they'd just be waving their hands like, and then people are just like, okay, I need you to backwards somersault into that bale of hay over there. Yes, yes, and perfect. So anyway, after that small little scene is done, kind of subdued for what Merlin could actually be capable of at that age, we then have to move on to everyone finally taking advantage of the shocked enemy to then take out and make the others retreat for those that they don't kill on the spot. However, here's a small little hitch in all of that. Arthur only sees what happens with the magic because both Will and Merlin were standing where the mini tornado came up and happened. And immediately Merlin decides to try and tell Arthur the truth because throughout the entire episode, after hearing stuff from Will, Merlin is trying to come up with the courage to tell Arthur that he himself is a sorcerer, proving the point that Will would be right about Arthur needing to know the truth. So, by the time all that is happening, and after a small unnoticeable fight scene between Arthur and Kanan that ends in Arthur winning, I don't usually like to point out easy victory moments because they're easy victories because we know that certain characters are going to win. It's like why I don't watch a lot of Death Battle unless I know the outcome is going to be a surprise. Sorry, not sorry. But anyway, after Kanan is almost dead, because you can't have an episode ending with someone completely dying without a plot twist, Kanan in his near-dying state picks up a crossbow and tries to shoot Arthur. And then Will decides to take the arrow for himself. I'm starting to think that Joe DePesce is just typecasted to be a character that dies in all the shows that he's in. Skins, this show, Game of Thrones. I'm kind of getting the vibe that it's just like, I'm only doing this until my character dies sort of money. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? So, we then have a nice little touching scene where Will decides to take the entire credit of being the one that saved Arthur twice by taking the credit for the tornado thing, and dying peacefully knowing that his best friend was by his side in his final moments. Everyone left him and Merlin alone together to at least talk one last time in private. And we then have to end off the episode first with a pyre fire of Will's body, with Arthur just saying he should have told him about Will being the sorcerer because magic is dangerous. I swear, 10 episodes in, I'm just like, Arthur, you had your life saved by magic so many times. Just shut the fuck up. Shut up. And with Merlin's mom just trying to comfort her son, saying that she'll be fine on her own and he can return to Camelot, because one day he'll be the kind of man that is going to be by Arthur's side and he's going to need on his side. And when that time comes, the truth will be known for good. And then close out. And I know what you're probably thinking. I left out a lot of stuff that should have been mentioned along with the episode. But if I'm honest, certain episodes like this, you can kind of skim over the certain other dialogue moments because of how rich in tapestry this is for later on episodes. This is good groundwork for other things. But in general, this is the moment of truth. The 10th episode in Merlin's entire run. My thoughts? I fucking love this episode. And I know, I love a lot of the later episodes because this is when I first started getting serious about the fandom, but allow me to elaborate. This is one of the only times in the first run that I actually first started the show where I get to see backstory into teenage Merlin's history. Him in Eldor, a simple farm kid, later learning magic and trying to make the best of his life, even with his best friend finding out about his secret later on in his teen years, and then having to leave because his mom finds out his best friend knows his secret. And it's like, okay, this is backstory of Merlin I wish I honestly knew back when I read the original story of the Legend of King Arthur, because this is very good tapestry sort of stuff going on, and it lays the groundwork for so many other mysteries behind Merlin's backstory that no one else really pointed out for me in this continuity. And it kind of matches well with what I would later read in the old myths of Arthurian lore, because some of the episode stuff in this show kind of matches with the original canonicity in ways that, if you honestly think about it, would actually fit where both continuities are essentially just overlapping each other to the point where the show is just more mythology, just expanded more. But my only gripes with this are as follows. Instead of having Merlin accompanied by Morgana, Gwen, and Arthur, there could have been a different story here. Because, honestly, this would have been a good solo episode for Merlin to just show how strong he's become as a sorcerer in general. I would have loved to at least see how far Merlin has become, or, I'm sorry, how far Merlin has come in his journey, and also see what he would have done with the current king. That would have been an interesting new development and good world building for what's going on in the series. I understand why they didn't do it, and I will talk about it after I finish all of season 1 for you guys, but all I will say is there could have been something a lot grander with this. Second thing, a lot of the effects and stage acting were kind of noticeable. Extras that just stared at the camera too long or just making goofy faces for no good reason, and the fake stab motions that happened throughout the episode, even during the fight between Arthur and Kanan. All you saw was the sword going right there. Done. You already knew it's gripped. Sorry. You already knew that it was gripped by his arm, so what's the big shock about adding the stabbing effect? Honestly, there was so many flub-ups in how the acting was for the extra stuff and how combat motions happen that I'm honestly astonished that no one else noticed this. And the third thing that I find almost super annoying about this episode is the fact that they try to downplay so much of Arthur's whole combat prowess that it's almost insulting. Later on in the series, he's shown as a good tactician and a good leader, as well as a good combat expert to outmatch armies at a time. So, in comparison to this episode, it's kind of a giant insult to people that not only watched the series in the first place and then just rewatching it, but it's also an insult to people that actually read the original mythology. Because Arthur, in general, is a good strategist, a good tactician, and an amazing fighter that could have obviously saw all the plot holes in fighting off kill-or-be-killed enemies the same way I did. But anyway, those are just my own personal stuff, but in general, this is an amazing episode for people that just want to pick up and watch from just seeing how Merlin interacts in an environment that is completely familiar to himself, away from Camelot, away from the magic band, and him just being in his pure element, being with his people, with his mom, with his townsfolk, with his friends, just being in that element. And then also having some good sort of action stuff for those of you that aren't ruined by life like I am. So in general, I would give this whole episode I'm going to go into the 0 to 10 rating for this. I'm going to give it a 7.9 out of 10 and give it a B+. Mostly because it's a great episode. I love it. It's one of my personal favorites of Season 1. But I will acknowledge that the faults for myself are too huge to see with this episode. Again, life ruined me. I know too much to just ignore how fucked up certain elements are. Anyway, though, next time we're going to be talking about episode 11. The Labyrinth of Gedrith. You know, the unicorn episode. So, to all of my magic users out there, remember to first live in a land of myth and a time of magic, and make all of your spells mystically defying. Peace!